Today we'll start Nun Aleph Amud Beis. It's the last three words of the page. Mamish, the bottom line. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. It's just a learning with Shem B'Kis Migdash immediately. It should be a panacea. Okay, so the Gemara here says, Ketzad Asa Maimer. How does it work? So it says if he did Maimer, and then the Mishnah goes on to explain, and then he gave a get. The problem with the Mishnah is that it started off with the machlekes from Gamliel and the Chachamim that yesh Maimer achar Maimer and yesh get achar get. Then it asks a question. It says Ketzad, and it gives me an example of someone that does Maimer and then a get. But that wasn't what the machlekes was about. So the Gemara challenges, it comments on this. It's not consistent. You're telling me an example of something that we weren't talking about. The Gemara says on the top of the Beis, "Hi get achar getu, hi get achar getu." You're telling me a get achar get. You're not telling that to me. You're telling me a get achar maimer. We asked Ketzad, how was the case, and you give me a different story. So Amar Rav Yehuda Hachi Kamar. You have to. We just started Nun Beis on the top, 52a. Okay. The very top line. It says that the punctuation is wrong in the Mishnah. What you have to do is you have to put a big period right before the word Ketzad. End of story. It goes like this. Get achar get, u'maimer achar maimer, kida amram. We're finished with that. That's, as we have discussed, that's a machlekes. Now, yavam echad b'yavam achas ketzad hatarasan. If I have one yavam and one yavama, what are the possibilities of making it continue on, that they should be permissible to marry or to marry out or to all of that? So then it goes on and it explains that. What does it say? Asa maimer b'yavamtai. If he started off with Maimer and then he gave her a get, so the halacha was that's Tzricha Mena Chalitza. All we did in this piece of Gemara is we changed the punctuation so that we should be able to say that the Ketzad is not a question on how is there a case of Maimer achar Maimer, but the Ketzad is the question is how in general do we deal with one Yavam and one Yavama when this happens or that happens. Okay. Yeah, this is like Rashi and Chumash. When you know Diktuk, every Rashi is a Diktuk Rashi. When you don't know Diktuk, then every once in a while there's a Rashi that's a Diktuk Rashi that you skip. Yeah. Here you have a Gemara that's really just a grammar Gemara. Like, where do you put the punctuation?
Right. Yeah.
So,
how do you end a sentence with interrogative so it's not interrupt?
So no, we ended the sentence before the interrogative. We ended up. Oh no, you have to do it like this. Ketzad. Yeah, the period went before the Ketzad, and then we say Ketzad. How was this? Now, what we wanted to it's not how was. It's a new how is this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It says Asa Maimer Ubal Harisa Kamitzvasa. The one case of the 16 case Mishnah, there was one case that was actually correct. That was when he did Maimer, and then he had relations with her. So it said talking about the Yavam with the Yavama. So we said, so that was done correctly, kimitzvasa. That was actually the one.
You don't usually have relations after Maimer. You go do the chuppah
and Maimer would be comparable to the Kiddushin. And then right. The relations would be after that. Mm-hmm. Right. He would just take her home.
But it's just assumed that it's the chuppah and everything also with Maimer? Or?
Could be. I don't know if chuppah is the Nesuin though.
Nesuin, right. Okay.
Yeah, the Nesuin by the Yavam is relations. Yeah. So it goes Kedushin and Nesuin. So Areza Kamitzvasa. Lema Messiah Leila Rav Huna. This seems to be a support to Rav Huna. Rav Huna is a second generation Amira, a student of Rav, the head of the yeshiva in Surah. Rav Huna says, Mitzvah Yevama, what's the mitzvah of Yibam? Mekadesh v'achakach bayal. First you do the Kedushin. What's the Kedushin? Is the mimer. And then you do the relations. And that's, the Gemara says, well, you don't have to say that this is really supporting Rav Huna, because we can also read it, Ema af zek mitzvasa. Also, this is according to this mitzvah. In other words, I don't have to say that the Mishnah is telling me that what Rav Huna is saying, that you have to do it like this. The Mishnah is telling me is that if you did it like this, it's also acceptable. Rav Huna tells me I have to. The Mishnah says that it's acceptable. Gemara says, Pshita, telling me that it's acceptable? Of course it's acceptable. Well, Sal Kadait Chamina Kivan Damar Mar could have thought that maybe there's a slight problem with doing the Yibam in such an order. First you do Mimer and then you have the relations. There could be a slight problem. What would the problem be? Problem would be, Kivan Damar Mar, since it was taught, the master said, Ha'isa Mimer bi Yevamti Parchem Mene Zikas Yivmen, V'chalav Zikas Ersin V'Nesuin. It's possible that with the Mimer, instead of completing the Yibam with the mitzvah of Yibam, what you've just done is you've turned this into a regular marriage. A malav mitzvah kavod. Maybe you've ruined the mitzvah of Yibam. That wasn't 100% what we were saying before when we quoted this. Before we were saying that it takes off the brother's zika, and now on this individual he has to continue with the erisin and nesuin with the. As he's taken off the attachment to the other brothers. And now we're saying that maybe what it means is he's taking off the attachment and now there's no mitzvah left. It's not the mitzvah of Yibam anymore because he did Mimer. Gemara says, Kamash Malan, no, it still is the mitzvah of Yibam. That's actually kimitzvasa, to do Mimer and then to have the relations. That is the mitzvah. Okay. Now we go back to explain what Rav Huna said. Gufa. Amar Rav Huna. Remember, when we use the word gufa, we're explaining an Amayra. When we use Amar Mar, we're explaining a Tana. Yeah, that's the way we've been following with this. It seems to match 90% of the time. It's good enough. So, Rav Huna says, Mitzvahs Yevamin, how do you do the mitzvah of Yibam? Mekadesh v'achakach bayal. First, you do the kedushin. That means the betrothal, which is mimer, and afterwards he has the relations. Vimbal v'asa mimer. If he has the relations first, and then he does the mimer, kana he's kaina. Okay, let's let that pass, and we'll let the Gemara ask. The Gemara will challenge it for us. It says, Imbal v'asa mimer. If he has relations and then he does the betrothal, pshita, everything that was significant was already done before. So of course he's kaina her. And it has nothing to do with the mimer, it has to do with the first relations, which that's a kinyan. Ela ema, rather what we should say is, in baal beloy mimer kana. If he was baal, not va'asa mimer, and he didn't do mimer, that's the chiddush. That just the relations itself is enough for Yibam. For the levirate marriage.
Yeah, I think the Torah stipulates that you have to marry her.
Right. And how is that marriage done? Simply through the relations. So the Gemara says, the Gemara has a question on this. V'hatanya loike. We have a brisa that someone that goes straight to the relations without the betrothal gets malchus. Now, what the Gemara's understanding is that there's a biblical law. You get malchus, probably it's a violation of a negative commandment or something. But there's a biblical law that there has to be kedushin before they have the relations. The Gemara says, no. Makas mardus midrabanan. That's just a rabbinic law. And now, how did this come about? So the Gemara explains. The Rav mangid mande mekadesh bebiyah. Mangid is malchus. Rav would give malchus to any person that did kedushin, that his betrothal was done with the relations. We're going to see at the end of this that there's a problem with the betrothal being relations, because you need witnesses by the betrothal, which basically means that he needed witnesses to the relations.
But he had witnesses.
Yeah, right. So there's a problem to this. This is not the correct the correct way things are done.
Wow.
So, mande mekadesh b'shuka. No, that's if he's mekadesh b'kesef. So,
General is not case Malchus is punished for
yeah, that's what we did here. We switched it from malchus deraisa to makas mardus midarabana. We thought when it says loike, we thought it meant deraisa, and the Gemara answers that it's the makas mardus. Umanda mekadesh b'shuka. Someone that just goes over to a woman in the marketplace without like arranging a date and all of this, and just marries her in the marketplace. Rav gave malchus for that. Manda mekadesh b'lei sheduche. Someone that marries a woman without discussing it beforehand. What does he do? He goes over to well, the last case could have been discussed beforehand, but it wasn't arranged that this is going to be the marriage. He just walked over to her with his friends and said, okay, watch this, guys. No, it could have been discussed. B'lei sheduche is he is mekadesh b'shuka. There are witnesses, but we consider this to be pritzas. One that's mekadesh b'lei sheduche is that he catches her by surprise. You know, like the way the court does when they have to give someone, they have to serve them papers or something. They don't tell him they're coming. They hand it to him. So he doesn't say that he's coming to marry her. He just says, "Hariyat mekadesh," handing her like a diamond, not a whatever, a ring. So she's caught by surprise. So umandim mevatel gita. There's another issue. We give malchus also from mevatel gita. Mevatel gita is someone that says that.
Give the gift that he just backs out and drives him crazy.
Well, I don't know if he's really able to be. Tosfos is discussing over here. Even if he's not really able to be mevatel the get, but he makes it. He starts to spread rumors that the get is not valid. So Rav would give malchus for that. Manda masar maidah gita. Someone that says after he gave the get, he says that the get was that he was coerced. So therefore, it's not good. Now it turns out that before every get, they make the person say that you're doing this willingly. You didn't tell anyone else before you came in here that that you've been coerced. And if you did say that, you're nullifying that statement in front of the witnesses. So it's called bittul meidais. There's a very serious procedure before the get is given, where they make sure that he'll never be able to ever come up with any sort of claim that there was some sort of coercion. They take care of everything. So how is he meiser meidah? Says it doesn't matter. We're not dealing with he's being mevatel the get literally. It's another sort of just a claim to ruin the get, so rumors start and all of that. Mandapakir shlicha derabanan, someone that's disrespectful to the messenger of the Bezdin. The guy shows up, gives you a summons to court, and he gets mistreated. So it gets the person that does that gets malchus. let's say someone was put in Shamtis, some sort of Cherem, for 30 days because he didn't listen to the Bezdin and he doesn't show up to try to get it removed. So he gets Malkus. Yeah. There has to be a follow-up with the Bezdin. Like, so what happens after people don't show up? Because we don't do Malkus today, that's becomes problematic. You get a summons to the Bezdin. So the guy doesn't show up. So then what do? So the Bezdin will allow them to go to court. Okay, so that will be the follow-up. But in those days, they weren't going to go to court. They were going to secular court. So the Bezdin itself had to take care that there was a follow-up, some sort of consequence for someone that doesn't come to Bezdin.
Somewhere they call the guys that come with the sticks.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Should carry out the Bezdin says.
Right. Also a son-in-law that lives in the mother-in-law's house. They think that there may be an attraction between the mother-in-law and the son-in-law. And so Rav would give Malkus for that. The Gemara says the door in the Chalaflai, that's only if he lives there. Yeah. Yeah. Who says that? Yeah, I saw that if they have their own quarters, I don't know where I saw. I think I saw it on the page somewhere. If he has his own quarters, then that's fine.
The first year.
Yeah, but it was normal for different communities. But they were supposed to have their own house, their own room, their own something. This was like in that one big area or something. I don't know. That wasn't appropriate. Gemara says the door in the Chalaflai, that's only if he's doyer, if he lives there. What about if he just passes by? This sounds strange. There was someone that passed by his mother-in-law's house. Rav Sheshes gave him Malkus. Says Ahu made him Havidayim Mechamsei. This person was suspected of inappropriate behavior with his mother-in-law. So then he passed by the house. They gave him Malkus. What were you doing over there? They gave him Malkus. But otherwise, it's only if he lives in the house. Nardoy Amri Bekula Leimangid Rav El Makadish Bia B'lei Shaduchi. In Nardoy, they said Rav would not give Malkus for all of this. Only if he was Makadish B'bia, he did the betrothal with relations, and B'lei Shaduchi, it was not discussed beforehand. Some say that that's not the issue. The issue is not was it discussed beforehand or not. It has to do with just Makadish B'bia, Mishum Pritzusa. Because how is a person Makadish B'bia? How does he have the betrothal with relations? There has to be witnesses there, and that's not modest. Yeah, it could be hein ede. It could be hein ede yichud, hein ede bia. Not necessarily is it.
The guy sees what it is. Yeah. The guy sees his wife going in school into a room.
Right.
Who is they going? You see them going into the
right.
That's where
right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Taner Rabbanan. Kate said Maimer. What is Maimer? Nasan la kesef, Aishava kesef, he gives money or the value. Shtar Kate said. How does a document of marriage work? Gemara says, Shtar Kate said. What type of question is that? Kidamran, we've said that before. Nasan la Saf Bishem Beshav Reyat Mekudeshesli. I know what the document says. He writes on a document. Behold, you are betrothed to me with this document, and he hands it to her.
Same thing.
Yeah, but Maimer is the value, and the document has no value. Maimer is money.
Oh, she's better.
No value. It's just a piece of paper.
So the engagements that they have nowadays is not really those.
Yeah, it's nothing. The engagement, traditionally, the engagement
That's
was
right.
was an
Near the,
agreement. Call it Tanaim. The engagement traditionally was an agreement that because the Kala's family is about to start preparing for a wedding, and because he's going to start renting a house and buying, beds and doing all of that, so they make an agreement that the Kala's going to show up and that he's going to show up, because they would like disappear for a few months till the preparation. They would have to make a contract. Otherwise, the guy doesn't come back and she loses, the whole Kala's family loses money and he loses money. And it ends up in court, these things. In Bezdin, at least, I know. But if there's no good reason to break the Tanaim, then people want their money back. I mean, I gave a down payment to this and I thought of that. Yeah. It gets messy. So, but that's just the Tanaim. That's just an engagement here. But the betrothal is actual marriage. It's a marriage to the extent, well, not by the Yibam, but by a regular Kedushin. If the woman would have relations with, she would be committing adultery.
Right.
It's not an engagement. Okay, Amar Abaya. Abaya answers this question that what are we talking about a shtar? You have a question about a shtar? He says, Hachi Kamar. Shtar ksuba sivam ketza. We're not talking about, you see, the ksuba, a lot of people think the ksuba is a marriage contract. No, ksuba is not a marriage contract. Ksuba is a monetary contract that says what he owes her if they get divorced, or even during this marriage, what he's responsible for. An actual marriage contract would say, Harayat Mikudeshes li b'shtar zu. And he would hand it to her. There would be no financials in there. Okay, so now we're talking about what is the financial contract of a Yevama. So it goes like this. Kosavla, he writes to her the following. Ana pleni bar plenis. Ana pleni bar pleni. Me, son of so-and-so, Kabilas yes plenis yivimti alai. I'm accepting this woman, my Yevama, and myself, Lozon, to support her, to feed her, Laparnasa, to support her Karai properly. However, the ksuba, which is the money that she gets if they get divorced, that I'm not paying for. That's from the estate of the deceased husband. The reason why he gets out of that, even though he's marrying her just like a regular husband, why doesn't he have to pay if he divorces her? He's the one that's doing the divorce. The answer is because the whole marriage he was compelled to do the marriage by Hashem, by the Torah, that says that he has to marry his brother. If it was his own choice, then it's getting into it, but the Torah is compelling him to do it. So, and it's by being a mitzvah. So that debt is coming from the first husband. However, if there's no money there, we still have a rule that ksuba is necessary, because we don't like that there's a woman that could be divorced without any financial strain on the husband. It has to be, it has to be more difficult than just, okay, get out of the house. Yeah. Right. However, the ksuba that he gives her does not include all of that ksuba. She doesn't collect the double money. She's probably holding two documents saying the first ksuba is from the estate, which however much money he decided to give for her. Yeah. And then this one says that check other documents for schedule this.
So there was a machloket though with Beis Shammai and Hillel about like you could give any reason to divorce somebody.
Yeah, there's a machlokes about that.
So
Yeah. So reasons for divorce, that's what we're going to learn about. That's and then another masechta. Went to food. Right. Okay. But whatever those reasons are, the sages want it to be difficult on him, that he shouldn't not just be like, okay, out. There has to be some, or else it would be it wouldn't be good for the women just to be like that. It's an institution for the women.
I think even for him, he might just lose at the spot
Right.
at the moment. And that's what do I do? What do I do?
Okay.
They say that like sometimes the in-laws keep the ksuba also just because out of like some sort of like argument or something. Chas v'shalom. They could-
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They know that it's supposed to be in the safe place.
Yeah.
Boimine Abaya Mirabba. Abaya asked his teacher a question. His teacher is Rabba, his uncle also probably. Nasam laget v'amala haret migreshes many viat miteres l'chala demahu. Yeah, I can see this happening. Someone gives his wife a get, and he says, "You're divorced from me, but I forbid you from marrying anyone else." Yeah, it's not a good get. It's not a valid get. But Abaya's question is, what about by Yibam when the get is anyways not a valid get? By Yibam, there's either Chalitza or Yibam. He either is severed from her or with Chalitza,
Right.
or he has relations with her. That's the Yibam. However, the rabbis instituted that a get that would have worked for a regular marriage would also work sort of, it has some consequence, partial consequences by Yibam as well. So because this get doesn't work anyway, what about if you use a get that doesn't work for Yibam? It's a biased question. So then he elaborates. He's not supposed to be, but he decided that he wants to get rid of the Yevama. She's waiting to marry him, and his chalitza is like this whole big process. He says, let me just give her a get. No, he doesn't want to. Yeah, so it's the start of a chalitza. The only thing is that when he does do a get, there are some halachic consequences to it. So what are those consequences? Well, she can never marry a Kohen. He becomes forbidden to her relatives. There are consequences. Now, let's say that this connection, this attachment gets dissolved for some other way. She died or he died. Was that get valid? Right? So that's what we're saying. Is there any validity to this get that usually doesn't work? Get Yevama derabanan hu baya yavam, it's all rabbinic. Get the mahani beishasish mahani biyavama. Do we say that only a regular get that would have worked for a married woman will work also for Yevama? Get the loy mahani beishasish loy mahani biyavama. If it's not a good get, so it doesn't work. So it doesn't work here either. Dilma, or maybe asilach lufi begita. What's the whole reason why we said that a get by Yevama works? Because someone may say that it's similar to a regular get. There may be some confusions we had before, like why did they institute get? Because of regular gittin or something. So if it's just about confusion, they may get confused about this one also. Rabbi responded, it's a problem. It works over here. You may be confused.
What was the bottom line we spoke about earlier about someone who replaced chalitza with a get?
Yeah. So we said that they have to do chalitza anyway. That's it. They have to do chalitza anyway. Okay, so maskifla Rabba Barchanan Elamiyata Yovla Naira Baalma Chinami de Pasta. Once you start making laws like this, then let's say he gives her a blank document, just a blank piece of paper, and he says, "This is your get." She opens up the envelope; said nothing inside, right? So you want to tell me that that's also a get because it may be confused with the real get? Amarle. So Rabba responded, "Hasamle pasul bekuna, hachaka pasul bekuna." Turns out that there's a concept called reach get. Reach get is like there's a tinge of a get. You know, it's assent of a get. And what happens is, at the beginning of Ebenezer, that a kohen can't marry a woman that was divorced. He also can't marry a woman that was sort of divorced. Yeah. So if there's a get that works to the extent that she's sort of divorced, the kohen can't marry her. So then by Yibam will say that that's also has those consequences. But if by a regular woman, it would be absolutely nothing, and she could still marry a kohen, then by Yibam we'd say it's still absolutely nothing. Now, it's only it has to have some validity by a regular marriage to have whatever some consequence by Yibam. Goes like this. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. V'isha grusha mi'isha la yikachu. And a woman that's divorced from her husband, he shall not marry. It's talking about the kohen. Afilu lo niskar shel mi'isha. Even if she was only divorced from her husband. I have to add in a few words over here. What does it mean only divorced from her husband? And the husband didn't allow her to marry anyone else. La yikachu, the kohen still is not allowed to marry her. Even though it's not a valid get. He made the statement together with the get that this get is only separating me from you, but you still can't marry anyone else, which is not a valid get. But based on that, we say that it's behind reach haget shapaisel bekuna. This is when we say a reach get, that there's a scent of a get, a tinge of a get. We say that this is a type of get that passes from marrying a kohen. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama says the following: Hari Amru, the sages have said, Amar Echad L'Lavler. If someone tells a scribe, K'seiv get la rusasi likashe ech nasena agashena. Have a get ready for me. I'm about to get married. I'm already betrothed, but have a get ready. Right after the marriage, I'm going to give it to her for the divorce. Sounds like prenups. Okay. Harisa get? It's a valid get? Yeah. Now there's a slight problem. It's called a get yashan. Slight problem. No, there is. The problem is if he's secluded with her after the get was written, then the get is not supposed to be used. However, if the get is used, it's still valid. So what we're saying here is that he's secluded with her afterwards, but then he gives her the get. It's a kosher get. Why is it a kosher get? The reason is because since when the get was written, it could have been used right away because he's already betrothed, right? Not just engaged, he's betrothed. So when he used it after the marriage, it's as the get had validity when it was written. Let's say there's just a woman that he knows, tells the scribe, write me a get for that woman. Ain't get, it's not a get. Because right then he couldn't have used it anyway. Was he going to divorce every woman that he knows? They're not married. So then he happened to have married her. So the get that he has prepared in case he would have married her is not valid because when it was written, he wasn't married to her. Boy Rami Bar Chama, so all of that, by the way, was an introduction to what he wants to say. Boy Rami Bar Chama, now his question is, Liyavim Taimahu. If he has a get written after the brother dies, but before he does Yibam, excuse me. He's divorcing his Zika, but he wants to use it after he marries her. He has to get written. He doesn't give it to her till after the Yibam. Yeah, it could be. Right. Do we say that because he's attached to her, it's considered like it's a betrothal? Or maybe he didn't do mimer? It's an interesting question. Where it says take him. We leave it unresolved. Interesting question. Boy Rav Chananya has a question. Kasav get lisi kasav leila mamari. Yeah, he's getting very technical here. You see, this fellow, he does mimer. he does a kedushin, he gives her money. Now, so he's betrothed to this Yevama, right? This Yevama. The brothers at this point are basically not attached anymore. When he did Maimer, he was already not. The Maimer sort of like designates that the attachment goes totally onto him. That's basically what it sounds like. Now, he writes a get, but he doesn't write the get to get rid of the Maimer. He writes in the get, it's not for the Maimer, it's just to get rid of the Zika, which is the attachment that he has equally with him and all the brothers. That was the original attachment, the Zika. So he says, I want the Maimer to stay on, but I want the Zika to go away. So he's writing a get just for the Zika. Now, when he breaks the attachment, so it's broken for all brothers. If he breaks the Maimer, then that was only his doing. The Maimer of Leila Zikasi, or he does it the other way. Or he says, I just want to get rid of what I did. I did a Maimer. Let me take that off and make it now back to what we open to everyone. So what's it in? Maimer ili zika karami, v'avaleke megarsh chatzi yisha, v'megarsh chatzi yisha, layasav aleklam. Do we say that the Maimer is stacked on the Zika, and now they become one? It's just the Zika is intensified. And now when you divorce just one, the Zika or the Maimer, it's like you're divorcing half a woman, which that's not a good get. A person can't say, I'm just divorcing half of you. So, do we say that they're totally independent? And he can divorce half the Zika and the Maimer. Those are two independent attachments. The Gemara says, why don't you just answer from Rava? Yeah, we had a nice complicated case before where there were three brothers and there were three wives that were not related. What happened was the first brother passed away. Reuven passed away, left Leah. So Shimon went ahead and did Maimer on Leah. But he didn't actually do the Yibam yet. He just did Maimer. Then Shimon passed away. Now there's a slight problem because Levi has two wives that he needs to do Yibam on. One is Shimon's second wife, which was Sarah. No, Shimon was married to Sarah, but Shimon had Maimer to Leah, which was Reuven's widow. So now, when he does Yibam on Sarah, what happens to Leah? Is that a Tzara? You only do Bayis Echadat Baini, you only build one house? Is Shimon married to Leah, and therefore you can't do Yibam? In other words, the question is, does Levi still have an obligation to do Yibam on Reuven's wife?
I wasn't here the day you learned that, but it does make sense because once he does Yibam with the first wife, Reuven's wife, he's carrying on the family's name. There's no reason to keep doing Yibam on the second wife.
Yeah, so.
And even the second wife only because of the suffering.
Yeah. So he has two houses that need to be built.
No, he only needs one. He only needs to build one house.
But he has to, each
He
brother.
has two options where
No.
you do it. Actually,
No.
He has to do the first
That's-
one, because the first one's with the rice, the second one's with the Rabbanan.
No. If Reuven passed away
Right,
with two wives, he
right,
does Yibam on one.
right.
Reuven passed away, he left a wife. Shimon passed away and left a wife. Now,
But- no, but
Levi,
Shimon's wife was only from,
no. Shimon had his own wife.
okay, got it.
Now, Levi has to do Yibam on both of them. The only thing is that before Shimon passed away, he had already tried to resolve the Yibam issue of Reuven's wife. He had done Maimer. Now the question is, when Levi does Yibam on Sarah, Shimon's wife, has he already taken care of Shimon's house, which includes Leah, Reuven's widow, or has he not taken care of that? And now he has to take care of Reuven. So there's a problem here. Anyway, that's a discussion in the Mishnah. But one of the cases over there was, let's say Shimon had given a get to the Maimer. Shimon had done Maimer on Leah, and then he had given a get to the Maimer. So you know what Rava says? Huta Tzarasa. Then he can marry clearly Shimon's wife because that's not considered that Shimon was married to Shimon had totally taken off his attachment to Leah even though he had a mimer, but he had given a get to that. So Rava clearly says that the mimer is independent from the zika, and you can get rid of the mimer without getting rid of the zika. So Shimon's get to Leah has only removed the mimer, and Levi still can do yibam on Leah and on Shimon's wife. Then he's back to now he builds two houses. Okay, so we have an answer to the question. The Gemara says you're right. You have an answer to the question. Rava had an answer. Rab Chananya didn't have that answer. To Rava was obvious. To Rab Chananya it wasn't. The Gemara says Teku. We don't know. He doesn't know. Okay. Chalatz vasa maimer. He did chalitza, and then he did maimer. We say that the mimer is nothing. Why? Because chalitza breaks off the zika. The only question is, why is the mimer nothing? It's a kedushin. So he married her. Now the truth is, he's not allowed to marry her. Kivan sheb laibana shuv layivna. If he doesn't build a house, he's not allowed to go back and change his mind and build a house. That's a prohibition. Because it's a sister-in-law. So, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Zu Divri Rabbi Akiva. You know why the mimer is nothing? Because this is following the view of Rabbi Akiva. Damrein kedushin teifsim b'chayv elaven. Because there's a prohibition there, so the marriage is nothing. Mimer is nothing. Aval chachamim yeshach chalitza klum. Chacham say that after chalitza there is something. It's a prohibition, but the marriage takes effect. He's going to need a divorce. You want to learn that long Mishnah with the 16 cases, that's all those cases are following Rabbi Akiva, you're going to get into trouble. Because Vaktani Reisha, one of the cases said, Nasan get Vasa Maimer. Let's say he gave her a get. And then he did Maimer. It says, Stricha get for Chalitza. You have to give a get to get rid of the Maimer, but he never did Chalitza, he has to do Chalitza as well. Be Rabbi Akiva. If it's Rabbi Akiva, given the Avla get, once he divorced her already, Mimahani B'Maimer, would the Maimer really take effect? Rabbi Akiva is very strict about this. Vatanya Rabbi Akiva Minayin Leisen Get Liyavantish Nesra Lavilamis. From where do we see that if someone gives a get to his Yevama, that he's never allowed to marry her again? Shnemar LeYuchel Baila Rishna Sheshalcha Acher Shiluach. If a woman is married to a man and he divorces her, she marries someone else and he divorces her or dies, then the first husband wants to take her back. The pasuk says LeYuchel Baila Rishon Asher Shalcha. The first husband that sent her away is not allowed to remarry her. Now the Rabbi Akiva learns this to say that it's actually two statements. LeYuchel Baila Rishon is one statement, and Achar Shalcha, Achar Shiluach, or someone else that has sent her away, even if she hasn't married someone else, is still forbidden. Who is that one that has sent her away that is never allowed to marry her again, even if she's never married someone else? It's another case. It's talking about the guy that doesn't want to do yibam. He does a get instead of chalitza. He's never allowed to marry her back. Rabbi Akiva has a pasuk that says he's not allowed to marry her. He gave a get, this fellow in our case, in our Mishnah. He does maimer, and it says that he has to do a get to the maimer. Besides for chalitza, according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no marriage there. Amar Rav Ashi, get yivam in midirabanan across machta ba'alma. You know how we answer this up? It's not chayve lavin. It's not a negative prohibition. That pasuk is just asmachta. Really, it's only a rabbinic. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the get doesn't really create a prohibition on the yavam for marrying the yavama. It's only rabbinic, and therefore a rabbinic prohibition, Rabbi Akiva will say, is a real marriage if it's violated. Yeah. Tani Nami Hachi was also taught in Bryce Amar Rebbe. Rebbe says, "Eina dvarim halalo amor mel div Rabbi Akiva." This Mishnah is only following Rabbi Akiva. She'es a chalutza ke'erva, because he makes a chalutza, a woman that chalitza was performed to, as if it's a close relative that's forbidden to marry. And if that's the case, a marriage is not even considered a marriage afterwards. But the sages say according to the sages, after chalitza, the marriage still is there. However, I say, Masai, when do I say that after chalitza, a marriage is a marriage and they're going to need a divorce? That's only if it's done properly. How is that?
So you do need to give a get after chalitza? I thought
If there is, chalitza should resolve everything. But let's say after chalitza, he goes ahead and he does maimer, a type of kedushin. So it's a machlekes to Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim. Rabbi Kiva says that the maimer is nothing, and the Chachamim say no, he's going to need a get. Why? Even though there's a prohibition there, he wasn't allowed to do a marriage, but you violated the prohibition. Doesn't mean that it didn't accomplish something. You still did the marriage.
Oh, chalitza is like permanent.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I guess there are some occasions where you could just change your mind, and after I guess you can.
After a regular get, he can marry her back.
If
But
she
over
has a
here,
relationship with someone else.
if she hasn't married someone else.
What's about a regular case where that guy divorced her and marries someone in between? Then
She marries someone.
right, then that's an engagement. I mean, it's same like this case.
Yeah, it's the same case. It's the same case. According to Rabbi Akiva, it's not a marriage, and according to the Chachamim, it's going to require a get. It's a chai v'lavan. So, but Rebbe adds in bisman shekitshel l'shem ishus. After the chalitza, he can't be makadasher in a way of maimer. He has to say that he's just doing a regular marriage. However, aval kitshel l'shem yevamos. But if he thinks that he's doing yibam now, then then it's nothing. You know why? That's kedushay tos. That's a mistake. This is how when someone doesn't want to take a get nowadays, they try to make it that the whole marriage was a mistake. They go back and they say, I thought that this was someone else. They can't do that, but they say, I didn't know that this person had that issue. Anyway, they say the whole marriage was a mistake. So the marriage is a mistake, the whole marriage gets absolved without a get. So the Rebbe is saying, if he thinks that he was able to do a yibam sort of marriage here, so then the whole marriage is absolved. Why? Because he had already done chalitza. But if he does a regular wedding, so then it's something. Tan Yidach, another brisa. If he does the wrong type of marriage, he doesn't need a get. Doesn't matter. They say it's the same thing. I'm Rabbi Yosef, my time with the Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef says, what's the reason for Rebbe that says that it matters which way you go about this? It says, he gives a mashal. Let's say there's a convert that passed away without any relatives. Now, it turns out that the property becomes ownerless, and anyone that goes in there can acquire it. So there's a guy that lives next door, and he's weeding in his own property, and he stepped over the line, and he started to weed in the. So he doesn't acquire that property because he didn't even realize that he had gone over the boundary. He wasn't doing it to acquire it; he was doing it because he thought it was part of his property. The Laikani. That's why the same thing here. He did a marriage on this woman, thinking that it's going to be good because it's still a yevama. But turns out he had done chalitza, so it's nothing. Amalei Abaya says to his teacher, Rabbi Yosef, me dummy, that's a comparison. Hasam leika machavan lemikne. Over there, he had no intention to acquire the property. He was just picking out the weeds. Hachaka machavan lemikne. Over here, he wanted to marry her. He just used the wrong document. You go into the bank, you took the wrong paper. You have to use the one that says this on top. Okay, he used the wrong document. But he wanted to do the same. That should work. This is more similar to he was weeding in this guy's property, thinking that it's this convert that died, but it turned out it was the other convert that died. So he does acquire it, right? Okay. Ella Amar Abaya Hachmaya Skinan. Abaya says, you know what we're talking about? He says, get married to me with Maimer of Yevama. The Kasavar Maimer Iluzika Karam, Rebbe Savar Maimer Iluzika Karam, Yevasichalitzaf Kasolazika. He said that I'm only marrying you with a Maimer of Yevama. Now, Rebbe holds that how does Maimer work? Maimer intensifies the Zika. But since Chalitza was already performed, you have no Zika. So the whole marriage goes away. Rabbanan Sabri, Hailachudikai, Vahailachudikai. The mimer was never an intensification of the zika. The mimer was independent, like we said from Rava, that you can give a get to the mimer, the zika is still there. If he said before, yeah.
So how do you say that? So how is that now that you have to give?
Now he's doing a mimer. We're looking at the mimer. Is it a kedushin, which is a violation, but it's still a real kedushin? The only thing is, what was his intention at the kedushin? Was it at the kedushin? Was it to do a yibam sort of kedushin, or was it to do a regular kedushin? Now we're saying his intention was to intensify the zika with the mimer. So will that work? So the Rabbanan are saying, Rebbe says that it doesn't work. And the Rabbanan are saying, no, mimer is not an intensification of the zika. Mimer would always work. It works without the zika. So hashtanami mahani, it works now as well. Okay. Rava says his own pshat. If you would say just mimer, everyone would agree that it works. His words were slightly different. I want to get married with the attachment of a Yevama. You already did chalitza. Rebbe Savar Yesh Zika. Rebbe holds that there is a concept of Zika. What does Zika mean? Zika means that even without any mimer, without anything, he's already attached to this woman and he has prohibitions on all the relatives of her and everything. Rebbe holds that the chalitza has removed the Zika. Rabbanan Sabri ain't Zika. Rabbanan say there was never a Zika.
What was the situation again?
He performed chalitza. Now he's doing a type of mimer, but the way he's doing this mimer after the chalitza is he's saying that he wants to marry her with the zika. Now, if zika is a real thing, an attachment, he's intensifying the zika into a marriage. He already severed. According to Rebbe, the zika originally was a real thing, and he severed it. It doesn't exist. According to the Rabbanan, there was never a concept of zika. And if he would have said before the chalitza that he wants to marry her with the zika, so it would have worked anyway, even though zika is not a real thing. So now after the chalitza, it would work also. Yeah, it's just the language of the Ein zika mi so mi kari lo amales gachli bezika siv mila mahani hastanami mahani. Even though before it wasn't a real thing, but the language would work. Yeah, it's bechi hailishna with such a language. That's we're turning this machlekes Rebbe and Chacham very technical. Rav Shravya Amar b'chalitza kshera. If it would be a regular chalitza, idam alas gachli bezika siv mikuliam leipligid leimahanya. If it would be a regular chalitza, everyone agrees that it's all over. Nothing is going to work now. Here, the chalitza wasn't a real chalitza. There was a problem because he did a get first, and then he does chalitza. One person holds that chalitza psula actually works. That's Rebbe. The Chacham say the chalitza psula is not a real chalitza, and so therefore the mimer afterwards is going to work. This one, they did a get first and then a chalitza. So that chalitza is not a real chalitza, so the mimer afterwards. Ravashi says chalitza psula does not work. Here we have a machlekes about if you can do a tanai in a chalitza. You can do a tanai in a get. We don't like to. But he says, this chalitza is only on condition that you then go and travel to London. I don't know, whatever. So, marsav yesh tanai b'chalitza, marsav ein tanai b'chalitza. Is there such a concept of a condition? Sages say there's no tanai in a chalitza. Or Rebbe would say there's no tanai in the chalitza and the chalitza works. And the Chum would say that there is a tanai in the chalitza. And that's why the kedushin afterwards. Ravina Amar the Kuli Alma Yesh Tanai B'Chalitza V'Cha B'Tanai Kafel Kamithli Marsav Bin Tanai Kafel Marsav Lei Bin Tanai Kafel. There's this concept of when you make a condition, you have to go both ways. If you do this, then it will be effective, and then you have to add in the second clause that if you don't do this, then it's not effective. If you didn't do that, and you just made the condition going one way, if you do this, it's effective. You didn't say if you don't do this, it's not. is that still considered a condition? So that's a machlekes, and that would come out to if the chalitza was valid. If the chalitza is valid, then the mimer is not going to be valid. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Just
Sorry, I went a minute over, a little more.
seems like
I didn't want to do this again on Sunday.
it seems a little bit like this. Forget